The Crusher never actually drank beer. For 40 years, he built his entire persona around being the beer-guzzling, cigar-chomping, polka-dancing tough guy from Milwaukee. But according to Baron von Raschke, who knew him for decades, Reginald Lisowski never touched the stuff. He actually preferred wine. This is the story of the wrestler who made Milwaukee famous. Reginald Lisowski was born on July 11, 1926, in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a working-class suburb that would remain his home for his entire life. He was raised in a Polish family, the kind of tight-knit community where everybody knew everybody, and heritage meant everything. That Polish-American identity would become central to his wrestling persona, connecting him to the massive immigrant communities that populated the industrial cities of the Midwest. His father ran a saloon, and according to family legend, Reggie was already working as a bouncer by the age of 13, throwing drunks out of his father's bar despite weighing 200 pounds as a young teenager. Whether the story is entirely true or slightly embellished, it established a pattern that would define his life. Reggie Lisowski was always tougher than he looked, and he looked plenty tough. The South Milwaukee of his youth was a factory town, a place where men worked with their hands and measured their worth by how hard they could labor. The breweries and manufacturing plants that lined the shores of Lake Michigan provided steady work for those willing to put in the hours. It was not glamorous, but it was honest. The values Lisowski absorbed growing up in this environment, the emphasis on hard work, toughness, and loyalty, would inform everything about his wrestling career. He attended South Milwaukee High School, where he played fullback on the football team. He was a natural athlete with a stocky, powerful build that seemed designed for contact sports. He was not tall, but he was thick in ways that made opponents bounce off him. Football gave him his first taste of organized physical competition, teaching him how to channel aggression into productive violence. But his path to professional wrestling came through an unexpected detour. When World War II called, Lisowski answered, joining the United States Army and eventually being stationed in Germany. It was in Germany that Lisowski discovered wrestling. The army bases had wrestling programs, and soldiers with nothing better to do would gather to watch men grapple for entertainment. The sport captivated him in a way football never had. There was something about the combination of athleticism, showmanship, and controlled violence that spoke to him on a fundamental level. He began training, developing the fundamentals that would serve him for the next 4 decades. By the time he was discharged from the army, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with his life. He was going to be a professional wrestler. Returning to Milwaukee, Lisowski continued his training at the Eagles Club under Ivan Racy and Buck Tassi. He had his first recorded match late in 1949, facing Marcel Boucher at the Paris Ballroom on Milwaukee's South Side. It was an inauspicious beginning. Nobody watching that night would have guessed they were seeing the birth of a legend. His early career was brutal in ways that had nothing to do with what happened in the ring. Lisowski wrestled 3 to 4 nights per week at a Chicago armory, typically earning $5 a night. To support himself and stay in shape, he worked various blue-collar jobs during the day. He was a meat packer, he was a bricklayer, he laid cement and did whatever manual labor he could find. The working-class hero persona he would later adopt was not an act. It was his actual life. Fred Kohler was the first promoter to recognize Lisowski's potential. Kohler put him on television, exposing him to audiences beyond the armories and small venues where he had been grinding out his early career. By 1954, Lisowski had developed the barrel-chested physique that would become his trademark. He looked like a fire hydrant that had learned to wrestle. Short, stout, impossibly thick through the chest and shoulders. He was not elegant, he was not technical, he was a battering ram in human form. To further distinguish himself, Lisowski bleached his dark hair blonde. The visual contrast was striking. He started getting over as a strongman heel, a villain audiences loved to hate. His signature moves were the bolo punch, a devastating looping blow that seemed to come from nowhere, and a crushing full Nelson that could immobilize opponents for extended periods. He was not sophisticated, but he was effective. His tag team work during the 1950s established him as a reliable draw. He won the Chicago area NWA World Tag Team Championship with partner Art Nielsen. He continued finding success throughout the decade, often paired with his wrestling brother Stan Lisowski. They were not actually related, but wrestling has never let facts interfere with a good storyline. By 1959, a promoter made an offhand comment that would define the rest of his career. Watching Lisowski demolish yet another opponent, the promoter observed that he just crushes everybody. The nickname stuck. From that point forward, he was billed as Crusher Lisowski and eventually just the Crusher. It was perfect, simple, descriptive, impossible to forget. Until early 1965, the Crusher was one of the most hated heels in the American Wrestling Association. He was the villain fans paid money to see get beaten, even though he rarely did. His promos were exercises in controlled aggression, his gravelly voice promising violence and delivering on every threat. He was so good at being bad that something unexpected began to happen. The fans started cheering him. It happened gradually, then all at once. When the Crusher and his tag team partner, Dick the Bruiser, faced the team of Larry Hennig and Harley Race, the dynamic shifted. Hennig and Race were flamboyant brawlers, cocky and arrogant in ways that rubbed audiences the wrong way. The Crusher started calling them the Dolly Sisters, mocking their vanity and pretty boy affectations. Suddenly, the fans who had been booing the Crusher for years found themselves cheering for him instead. The babyface turn was organic. It was not scripted or planned. The audience simply decided they loved the Crusher too much to hate him anymore. His bluster became enduring rather than threatening. His promises to pummel da bum transformed from villain taunts into crowd-pleasing declarations. His working-class authenticity, which had made him a believable heel, made him an even more believable hero. The Crusher's gimmick was brilliantly simple. He absorbed tremendous amounts of punishment and still made comebacks for the win. No matter how badly he was being beaten, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed, the Crusher would rally. He would shake off the pain, fire up with righteous anger, and start throwing those devastating bolo punches until his opponent crumbled. Audiences knew the pattern, but they never tired of it. There was something cathartic about watching a working-class hero refuse to stay down. His promos were masterpieces of blue-collar braggadocio. He would brag about his 100-megaton biceps. He would promise to pummel the bum he was facing. He would call opponents turkey necks, a term that became his signature insult. His catchphrase was perfect in its simplicity. How about dat? 3 words that could mean anything: approval, surprise, challenge, satisfaction. Depending on his tone, it conveyed whatever emotion the moment required. When asked how he trained for matches, the Crusher had a ready answer. He would claim he ran along the waterfront in Milwaukee, carrying a large full beer barrel over either shoulder for strength. By the end of his training run, the beer was always gone. He would then dance polka all night with Polish barmaids to build his stamina. It was complete nonsense. But it was entertaining nonsense that reinforced his persona as a regular guy who happened to be extraordinarily tough. The partnership with Dick the Bruiser became the defining relationship of both men's careers. Billed as cousins, despite having no actual family connection, they were known as the Cussin' Cousins. Nick Bockwinkel gave them another nickname that stuck. He called them the Saloon Goons. It was meant as an insult. They wore it as a badge of honor. The chemistry between Crusher and Bruiser was genuine. Both were built like fire hydrants. Both loved beer, cigars, and fighting. Both had gravelly voices that sounded like they had been gargling with broken glass. Both projected an authenticity that could not be faked. When they walked to the ring together, they looked like 2 guys from the neighborhood who had wandered in from the bar and were about to clean house. Their promos were legendary. The Crusher would brag about training by running along the waterfront with a beer barrel on each shoulder. He would promise to beat these two bums and then go down Halsted Street and dance the polka with all the girls and drink beer. Long-time AWA announcer Roger Kent would note that by the end of Crusher's training run, the beer was always gone. The audiences ate it up, if they felt they had not bloodied their opponents enough during a match. Crusher and Bruiser would trade punches with each other afterward. It was their way of showing the crowd that the violence was not finished, that there was more fight left in both of them even after the bell had rung. The fans loved it. Together they captured the AWA World Tag Team Championship 5 times. Their combined reign totaled over 1,300 days, a testament to their drawing power and the trust Verne Gagne placed in them to carry the tag team division. They also won the WWA World Tag Team titles 6 times in Bruiser's Indianapolis territory. In Japan, they defeated Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki for the NWA International Tag Team Championship on August 11, 1969, proving that their appeal transcended American borders. They were named PWBA Tag Team of the Year in 1972. They were, without question, the most dominant tag team of their era. Their feuds were legendary. The battles with Larry Hennig and Harley Race drew massive crowds throughout the AWA. The matches against the Vachon brothers were violent affairs that often spilled outside the ring. They faced Blackjack Lanza and Bobby Duncombe in wars that elevated both teams. Their matches against the Texas Outlaws, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, showcased their ability to work with different styles. The battles against Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens brought a technical element to their brawling approach. The Crusher also had notable partners beyond Dick the Bruiser. He won the AWA World Tag Team Championship with Verne Gagne in 1965, an unlikely pairing given their history as rivals. He held the titles with Red Bastian, Billy Robinson, and Baron von Raschke at various points in his career. In total, he won the AWA World Tag Team Championship 9 times with 5 different partners. But none of those partnerships captured the public imagination like his team with Dick the Bruiser. As Jimmy Valiant later observed, the Bruiser and Crusher were the first characters to wrestle where everybody loved them, no matter what they said or did. This opened the door for myself, Dusty, Superstar Graham, and Jesse the Body. Their proto-anti-hero personas were the direct blueprint for what Steve Austin would later make globally famous. Every time Austin crushed beer cans together, he was channeling Bruiser and Crusher whether he knew it or not. But the Crusher was more than just a tag team wrestler. As a singles competitor, he reached the absolute pinnacle of the AWA, proving that he could carry a promotion as its top champion. On February 15, 1963, the Crusher defeated Verne Gagne in Omaha to win the Omaha version of the World Heavyweight Championship. It was his first taste of singles gold at the highest level, but the more significant victory came on July 9, 1963, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when the Crusher defeated Verne Gagne again to win the AWA World Heavyweight Championship. This victory unified the AWA title with the Omaha version, consolidating the promotion's top prize into a single championship. It was a statement that the Crusher was not just a tag team specialist. He was a legitimate main event performer who could carry a company on his shoulders. He would lose the title back to Verne on December 14, 1963, but won it again in November of the same year. His reigns were short, as Verne had a habit of keeping the title close to himself, but they established Crusher as one of the elite performers in the AWA hierarchy. His third and final AWA World Championship came on August 21, 1965, when he defeated Maurice Mad Dog Vachon at Midway Stadium in St. Paul, Minnesota. The Vachon feud was one of the bloodiest and most violent in AWA history, the kind of program that drew huge crowds because audiences genuinely believed these two men wanted to hurt each other. Mad Dog was a former Olympic wrestler for Canada who had transformed himself into a wild, uncontrollable monster. Standing only 5'8", Vachon compensated for his lack of height with an intensity that was genuinely frightening. His interviews were terrifying, his matches were bloodbaths, his eyes would get a maniacal look that made audiences believe he had lost touch with reality. He filed his fingernails razor sharp. He gnawed on foreheads. He was banned from competing in 3 states because of his violence. When Crusher and Vachon faced each other, the results were predictably brutal. Blood flowed freely. The violence was unrelenting. Fans left these matches feeling like they had witnessed something genuinely dangerous. Crusher later joked about their battles in his unique way. He liked to say that the time he wrestled Mad Dog in the cage, he had to go to the hospital, and Mad Dog had to go to the veterinarian to get sewed up. It was the kind of line that captured everything people loved about the Crusher. Self-deprecating enough to be humble, but confident enough to remind everyone that he was still standing at the end. The feud with Vachon would continue for years beyond their singles battles. On August 30th, 1969, the Vachon brothers, Mad Dog and his brother Paul the Butcher, defeated Crusher and Bruiser for the AWA World Tag Team titles. They held those belts for over 2 years, during which time they faced Crusher and Bruiser repeatedly in matches that always delivered the violence fans demanded. Their 1970 steel cage match at Comiskey Park in Chicago drew a massive crowd who came specifically to see blood. They were not disappointed. Both teams left the cage battered, bloody, and exhausted. Beyond the AWA, the Crusher had success in multiple territories. He had a notable run in the World Wrestling Federation in the early 1960s, where he was a nemesis of Johnny Valentine and a young Bruno Sammartino, primarily in the Pittsburgh promotion. He drew large crowds to Forbes Field with his battles against both men. His appeal transcended regional boundaries because his working-class persona connected with audiences everywhere. The Crusher's appeal extended beyond wrestling arenas. In 1964, the Novas released their tribute song, with lead singer Bob Nolan doing an uncanny impression of the Crusher's gravelly voice. "Do the hammerlock, you turkey necks," the song demanded. It reached number 88 on the Billboard charts and number 40 in Canada. The Cramps later covered it on their album Psychedelic Jungle. The Ramones recorded their own tribute on their final studio album, Adios Amigos. David Letterman played the Novas version regularly on his late-night show. It was one of the rare instances where a professional wrestler inspired a legitimate pop culture moment. In 1974, the Crusher and Dick the Bruiser starred in the movie The Wrestler, beating up a posse of mobsters on the big screen. It was not going to win any Academy Awards, but it demonstrated their crossover appeal. They were not just wrestlers. They were entertainment figures who transcended their sport. Jimmy Hart, who would go on to become one of wrestling's most famous managers as the Mouth of the South, recalled facing the Crusher early in his career. He was introduced as the man that made Milwaukee famous, Hart remembered, and the Bruiser was the most dangerous wrestler. "I just thought that was so wonderful. They were legends. I read about them in magazines growing up. I was so thrilled to be involved in that match." Hart recalled the professionalism displayed by the Crusher and the Bruiser, noting how they made their opponents look good while still maintaining their legendary status. In 1981, the Crusher's career almost ended in an instant. Jerry Blackwell was a 450-pound wrestler who had feuded with Lisowski over the Crusher moniker. Blackwell wanted to be called Crusher Blackwell, and the real Crusher objected. Their matches were built around this dispute. During one of those matches, Blackwell attempted a move from the top rope. He botched it badly. 450 pounds of Jerry Blackwell landed directly on the Crusher's right arm. The nerve damage was catastrophic. It extended from his shoulder all the way to his wrist. Doctors told him he would never wrestle again. He was 55 years old. Most men his age would have accepted the diagnosis and retired gracefully. The Crusher was not most men. He spent 2 years doing strength training while officially retired from the ring. He worked relentlessly to rebuild the damaged arm. He refused to accept that his career was over. As he told the Milwaukee Journal in 1985, "You gotta be able to take the pain, I will tell you that. You know, I got 200, 300 stitches in my body, and you got to go to the doctors yourself. There is nobody to baby you. Some football player breaks a toenail, he has got 100 guys looking at him." And in 1983, he returned to the ring. His comeback was triumphant. Teaming with Baron von Raschke, he defeated Jerry Blackwell and Ken Patera for the AWA World Tag Team Championship. It was poetic justice. The man who had nearly ended his career was now part of the match where Crusher proved the doctors wrong. They held the titles until losing them to the Road Warriors in August 1984. But the American Wrestling Association, AWA, was changing. Hulk Hogan had jumped ship to Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation, and many of the other top talents followed him. The territorial system that had sustained American wrestling for decades was collapsing. Laverne Clarence's promotion, which had been the Crusher's home for most of his career, was crumbling. Before the end came, however, the Crusher had one final memorable feud. Jesse the Body Ventura was the opposite of everything Crusher represented. Ventura was vain, arrogant, and obsessed with his physique. He would spend the opening minutes of his matches doing elaborate posing routines, flexing for the crowd and admiring himself. The no-frills Crusher found this behavior insufferable. Before one of their matches, the Crusher interrupted Ventura's posing routine and challenged the Body to a posing contest. With the fans deciding the winner, the stakes were raised. If Ventura won, the Crusher would have to pierce his ears and wear earrings. If Ventura lost, he would be forced to smoke one of Crusher's cigars. The crowd voted for Crusher. Ventura reluctantly choked down the cigar while the Crusher celebrated. It was exactly the kind of entertainment that had made him beloved for decades. Seeing the writing on the wall with the AWA, Crusher went to work for McMahon on a part-time basis. He appeared at World Wrestling Federation house shows throughout the Midwest, bringing his legend to audiences who might have been too young to remember his prime. He later claimed that he made more money working part-time for McMahon than he did working full-time for the frugal Verne. Given Verne's reputation for tight-fistedness, this was probably true. In 1986, he occasionally teamed with The Machines as Crusher Machine. It was a strange late-career turn, but wrestlers do what they need to do to keep working. His final recorded match came at a World Wrestling Federation house show in Omaha on February 15, 1988. He was 61 years old. He replaced Billy Jack Haynes to team with Ken Patera against Demolition. The match ended in disqualification when Mr. Fuji tripped Crusher with a cane about 3 minutes in. It was not the most glorious finale, but few careers end the way they should. His last television appearance came at World Wrestling Federation's Over the Edge pay-per-view in 1998. He sat alongside his old rival, Mad Dog Vachon, in the front row. Jerry Lawler made fun of both men's age and tried to steal Vachon's artificial leg. Vachon hit him over the head with it, and Crusher punched him. As Lawler retreated, the two former enemies shook hands. It was a perfect final image. Two old warriors united by the battles they had shared. Outside of wrestling, Reginald Lisowski lived the quiet life of a devoted family man. He married Faye, and they remained together for 55 years until her death in 2003. They had 5 children, including daughters Dawn and Sherry, who would become the guardians of his legacy after his passing. Despite traveling constantly for his wrestling career, he always maintained his residence in South Milwaukee. He never forgot where he came from. His children remember him as a loving father who was different at home than he was in the ring. The Crusher persona gave way to Dad the moment he walked through the door. He attended his son's high school wrestling matches, cheering them on from the stands like any other parent. His opponents always wanted to beat the Crusher's son, which added extra pressure, but he was always there to support them. Still, there were moments when the two worlds overlapped. His daughters recall that there were not a lot of dates when they were teenagers. The Crusher had a way of standing in the doorway when they came home that discouraged suitors from overstaying their welcome. Having a father who could legitimately hurt people tends to have that effect. In his later years, the physical toll of 4 decades in the ring caught up with him. Multiple surgeries on his hips and knees left him increasingly immobile. He underwent heart bypass surgery. Most devastatingly, doctors discovered a non-cancerous tumor on his brainstem in March 2005. The surgery to remove it left him partially paralyzed. Feuds' death in 2003 had already taken something vital from him. When you spend that long with someone, their absence creates a void that cannot be filled. He spent his final months in a nursing home, having to be fed through a tube. But, according to his son David, he never stopped working out. Even at the end, the Crusher was still trying to stay in fighting shape. On October 22, 2005, Reginald Lisowski died of a brain tumor at the age of 79. His funeral was exactly what you would expect for a wrestling legend. A wrestling ring with crimson ropes was set up at the cemetery. On the mat were a pair of black wrestling boots. He, his wife Faye, and their infant son Gary, who had died young, are all interred at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery near Milwaukee. He was survived by 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and 1 great-granddaughter. Verne Gagne, his longtime rival and employer, reacted to his death with characteristic honesty, saying, "We had some dandy matches." The Crusher never was a great technically skilled wrestler, but he was one of the most popular performers ever. It was a fitting tribute from a man who understood exactly what the Crusher brought to the business. Bobby Heenan also spoke at a tribute show held shortly after Crusher's death, telling stories about their years together in the AWA. At the end of the show, all the wrestlers came out to the ring and did a beer toast to the song "Roll Out the Barrel." It was exactly the kind of send-off the Crusher would have wanted. Mad Dog Vachon, speaking at a tribute show that December, noted that even at 75 years old, Crusher could still bench press 350 pounds. That was the Crusher. Never stopping, never surrendering. Fighting until the very end. The Crusher has been inducted into multiple halls of fame. He was inducted into the WCW Hall of Fame in 1994, the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame in 1996, and the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2005, inducted alongside Dick the Bruiser in the tag team category. This recognition cemented his Hall status in wrestling history. He was ranked number 55 on Dave Meltzer's list of the top 100 wrestlers of all time, a testament to his lasting impact on the business. His influence extended far beyond championship statistics. The Crusher proved that a wrestler did not need to be technically proficient to connect with audiences. What mattered was authenticity, charisma, and the ability to make people believe. He was one of the biggest drawing cards in AWA history, someone whose name on a card guaranteed strong attendance. His feuds with Verne Gagne, Mad Dog Vachon, and countless others drew money consistently for decades. That drawing power became a defining feature of his career. The relationship between the Crusher and Dick the Bruiser set the template for tough guy tag teams that would follow. The Road Warriors acknowledged their debt to the Saloon Goons. The Steiner brothers operated in a similar vein. Any tag team built around 2 powerful brawlers who refused to back down owes something to the precedent Crusher and Bruiser established. But his greatest honor came on June 8, 2019, when South Milwaukee unveiled a bronze statue of their favorite son. The statue had been 14 years in the making. After Lisowski's death in 2005, fans immediately began talking about ways to memorialize him. The idea percolated for years without gaining traction. Then in late 2017, Chris Smith, the city attorney of South Milwaukee, launched a crowdfunding campaign. On his first day at the job in 2016, Smith went into the office of his colleague Jesse Wesolowski and noticed Crusher's obituary framed on the wall. That image stuck with him. The response to the campaign was overwhelming. More than $40,000 was raised in just 90 days. Fans contributed from across the country, many sharing stories of what the Crusher had meant to them growing up. The outpouring of support demonstrated that even decades after his prime, people had not forgotten the Crusher. The statue was created by Milwaukee artist Thomas Holloran and the firm Vanguard Sculpture Services. which bills itself as the best fine art foundry on planet Earth. The work is life-sized and extraordinarily detailed, right down to the wrinkles in his forehead, the scars on his head from decades of combat, and the cauliflower ears that come from a lifetime of grappling. True to his legend, the bronze crusher carries a beer keg on his shoulder. The statue stands in a pocket park at 1101 Milwaukee Avenue, surrounded by landscaping designed to evoke a wrestling ring with its crimson border. The unveiling ceremony was dubbed Crusherfest, and it drew thousands of people from across Wisconsin and beyond. The event featured live bands including the Squeezettes and the Jeff Wynard Polka Band. There were professional wrestling shows, food vendors, beer and wine sales, wrestling memorabilia booths, and cigar sales in honor of the cigar-chomping legend. Baron von Raschke was among those paying tribute, recalling how Crusher had absorbed punishment blow after blow, bolo after bolo. He said, "This guy is something else." His daughters, Dawn and Sherry, were speechless when they saw the finished statue. Sherry said through tears that it was absolutely surreal. "We never expected anything like this," she added. "It is our legacy," Dawn said. "Everybody who is in our family will always have a reminder of who their famous grandfather was." He would have loved this. The statue became an instant landmark. Fans traveling through Wisconsin make pilgrimages to see it. Locals treat it with reverence, and when vandals damaged it shortly after the unveiling, the community's outrage was immediate and fierce. Dr. Crusher symbolizes the embodiment of the blue-collar, hard-working history of the people of South Milwaukee. As the official description reads, "A monument honoring his memory is a proud landmark for the people of South Milwaukee forever." Every June, South Milwaukee holds Crusherfest, a celebration featuring wrestling, polka music, beer, food, and everything else the Crusher would have loved. Professional wrestlers appear to sign autographs and perform matches. Polka bands play late into the night. The community comes together to honor a man who never forgot where he came from, even after he became famous. It is a testament to how deeply one person can become embedded in a community's identity, how one man with a big personality and an authentic connection to his audience can become immortal. The Washington Post, in his obituary, described him perfectly. A professional wrestler whose blue-collar bona fides made him beloved among working-class fans for 40 years. That was the Crusher in a single sentence. He was not the most technical wrestler, and he was not the biggest star in terms of mainstream fame. He never appeared at WrestleMania or headlined a pay-per-view event. But he was authentic in a way that audiences could sense, and that authenticity made him immortal. He perfected the beer-drinking tough guy gimmick decades before Stone Cold Steve Austin made it globally famous. He proved that a wrestler did not need fancy costumes or elaborate personas to connect with audiences. He just needed to be real, or at least to seem real. The irony is that the man who built his legend around drinking beer never actually drank it. He preferred wine. But he understood that the character was more important than the reality. The Crusher was not Reginald Lisowski. The Crusher was a folk hero, a symbol of working-class pride, a representation of everything Milwaukee wanted to see in itself. Reginald Lisowski played that role perfectly for 40 years. Leave a comment below with your favorite Crusher memory or match, and check out our other wrestling history videos for more stories from the territory days of professional wrestling. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Until next time.